Welcome, everybody, to this very special episode of the Real Sharks Podcast. It is your host, Rob, with Steve and Luke.
Yo.
That's right. And we're going to be talking about the top 20, or the Real Sharks top 20 best Batman, the animated series episodes. This is a Batman show that defined a generation, particularly our generation. You know, when people were still watching back in the day, people were watching the Batman with the boom and the pow and the zooms. But this was the generation and this was the Batman that took it more dark and made Batman, I would arguably say, what is Batman today and how we know Batman and perceive Batman. So let's go ahead and get started with the Real Sharks top 20 best Batman the Animated Series episodes. So I thought we'd kick it off real fun and go backwards on this list because number 20 I thought was great. Was Fire from Olympus.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know about this one, it's about the story of shipping giant Maximilian Zeus, who basically is in trouble because now his shipping to the mob has been found out, and basically he stole an electric cannon. And Batman basically, of course, comes to, save the day and do his detective work. But what's funny is he's lost his mind. So Maximilian Zeus, not only has he lost, but he literally thinks he's the embodiment, the reincarnation of Zeus himself.
Of Zeus,
and it's such a great episode. A great episode because it really plays into the Greek myth. Because like when Batman comes up, he's like, and from the depths comes my brother Hades. He's like, hail Hades. And Batman's like, okay.
Yeah.
So, I think this episode is good at number 20. I mean, it's a very fun episode. Really gives you kind of an in-depth to kind of the themes that Batman the Animated Series would play with throughout the show. I want to get your guys' take. What do you think about number 20, though? Fire from Olympus.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think the Fire from Olympus is it's the definitive, here's a Batman villain that's crazy. Not just not just mentally crazy, but the dude is embodiment of Zeus. I remember he has the staff, right? The
lightning bolt.
He dresses like Zeus.
He dresses like Zeus. He talks like him. He's got a staff. He's throwing lightning at Batman. I was like, wow, this is when they go oh, Batman's got all these enemies that are crazy. I'm like, yeah. They're not wrong. This is one of them right here.
What do you think of this one, Luke?
Yeah, it's funny if you'll watch clips out of context. Because the thing to always remember about the animated series is that that Batman didn't really start to get integrated into part of the larger universe, with Superman and the Justice League, until later in the series. Mm-hmm. The first sort of season was really self-contained as the world of Batman. You didn't see a lot of other superheroes. I don't know if it was ever really implied, but Batman was Batman. So if you saw clips out of context, you could be reasonable if you know anything about the DC universe that maybe Batman actually did fight Zeus at some point. But no, in this case, it really is just, which is even funnier because there is technically Zeus in this universe. He's real.
He's real. Yeah.
At least, but in this world, it's no, he's just a crazy dude. Yeah, and and probably, he probably only good for one episode, because I don't know what you could really do with a guy that just thinks he's Zeus.
Yeah, well, the best part is when he's actually going away, remember? Because he's all like, this is Mount Olympus. He's like, there's, he's like the Joker. He's naming all of them as different gods.
Gods, yeah.
And this was done by Judith Reeves, Stephen and Garfield Reeves. Story was done by Paul Dini, and it was directed by Dan Reba. So that was Fire from Olympus, number 20. So let's get into number 19, which I thought was very fun too. It's a very good episode, I think, called Trial. Yeah, that's right. And this one is I actually think this is a very fun episode. Basically, it's the 9th episode of the 2nd season of Batman. Batman is kidnapped by the entire rogue gallery and put on trial from the new district attorney, who he's actually dating in the episode too, because Bruce Wayne, of course, is a playboy. So he's actually dating the very woman that's looking to put him away, essentially. But they all get out and basically put him on trial, and it's one of the most funniest kind of capers because you have the Joker being the judge and Harley Quinn basically just one of the witnesses. But but what's funny about the episode is while they try to put Batman on trial, saying like he is the reason they are the way they are, it actually turns out in the end of the episode, they all would have ended up like that anyway, and they all kind of admit that.
They admit it, which is hilarious. I love that part of the episode, dude. Because that's interesting, putting Batman on trial to be like, we're insane because of people, a man like you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Also,
and the district attorney thinks that too. At first,
at first she did. Yeah, at first she was kind of like, well, maybe. And then like the funny thing about it, dude, when I was like dying when I was rewatching this, it's just Batman sitting there silent in a straitjacket, chained up, not singing, just watching it. I was like, you have this serious context of like, diving deep into these villains like personality traits and why they are the way they are. But then like you said, Rob, is just like, oh yeah, I would be like that and it's fine at the end.
Luke, what do you think of this episode, Trial?
Yeah, I do like the trial too. And it's also fun the way some the animated series approached material that other comic writers still try to approach. Christopher Nolan tried to approach the same topic in Dark Knight. He tried to insist that Joker's there because of Batman, and maybe he was in that version of the story. But with the trial, it kind of does away with that idea that Batman is responsible for the rogues galleries,
right?
Yeah.
So,
and this was done. The teleplay was done by Paul Dini. Story was done by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, who's we should mention too is one of the biggest producers, animators, storyboard creators, writers of Batman the Animated Series that even made it possible. And this was also directed by Dan Reba as well. So let's move on to the next one, which would be number 18, which I thought was another good one. The introduction of a very iconic villain to the Batman Rogues Gallery, which is, of course, Scarface, which is the episode Read My Lips, which is the 59th episode of the Batman animated series. Of course, features the ventriloquist and Scarface. The story basically about these a gang that's essentially putting together these, as they say, clockwork style heists, and basically no one can catch them until Batman, of course, is on the case. And when he basically comes to the hideout of the gang, he finds out that their main boss, the main villain, the main honcho is actually a ventriloquist, and he basically puts all this. He has a split personality. And he puts all his and the split personalities into this this dummy named Scarface, which is of course like one of the old stereotypical kind of crime bosses, hey you mugs, and the way he talks and everything.
Yeah.
But this episode is such a, because it would play off into the future of the series about, as we're going to mention too in this this list, mental health. Because this is a real good example of like the mental health that Batman portrays and the perspectives that are in the series. Because it is crazy, because this guy has such a split personality and he can change his voice so well, even computers are fooled by it. I mean, it's so funny because Batman is able to even maneuver around him and use leverage on him by turning him against himself. Which essentially is funny by making him think like making Scarface think the ventriloquist is the real is the enemy. What do you guys think of Read My Lips?
Yeah, I agree with you, man.
Yeah, and this will also, like you said, mental health too. And this will you will see a lot of this in the series, is the way the way the Batman villains in the animated series kept jumping between the goofiness and also like kind of dark, because it is a really ridiculous premise that a ventriloquist is like a Batman villain, and it's kind of, it doesn't dawn on you that like the wimpy sidekick, he's technically the mastermind, but he puts it into this ventriloquist puppet. But it's very creepy, and and the relationship he has with Scarface is very sad, because Scarface is so abusive.
He's so abusive.
Yeah. it's him. Like he is the person. He's the guy, and he like berates himself. He like talks down to himself. But it's still it's his mind. He is the person in control.
Right.
And it's very, very dark. But
which is like interesting too, dude. That's like he's beating himself up constantly. Like he's just like, watch your mouth, shut your mouth, and all, and then he, for again, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it. When Scarface like quote unquote dies, when he gets shot, he's upset, and that's where I was like, oh god, this guy's upset about this thing that would be abusive, right, to him, this object, but then also it's like he needs it for his mental stability in some way, and,
right.
And that we'll talk about this more obviously because there's the running thing with Batman, but it's also like, you can't save them all, Batman. Like, you can beat them, but you can't save them.
And this would play into some future episodes that are really funny, too. Like, later on, when the animated series progressed into the new animation style, you had the one where basically the gang is trying to basically cause him to have a mental breakdown and bring back Scarface. So they're having, like, a midget dressed like Scarface and, like, call him and everything. And he's like, well, you're not real. And he's just like, I'm real, dummy. So, and you'd also see too during the episode Lockup, Lockup, where it basically he's like, the guy held me over termites, like Scarface has a personality too, which is really funny because the ventriloquist is just a silent kind of guy,
Yeah, the actual like Albert Wesker is less of a personality than Scarface, but ultimately it is him.
Yeah,
it's so interesting.
It's funny. And it's funny because it gets lost too in the characters because they're like, no, you mean the ventriloquist is the boss? He's like, no, Scarface he's the man. And this episode was done by Joe R. Lasdale. The story was done by Alan Burnett, Michael Reeves, and Boyd Kirkland, who was the director. So let's get into the next episode, which is number 17, which I personally love, and I'm glad it's on this list, is Legends of the Dark Knight.
Yeah.
This one is an episode from the new Batman Adventures, which is still the Batman animated series, but it was the newer, basically the last season that they had. And this one was really funny because it was the 19th episode, and it's really funny because it's about three kids telling three different stories that reflect on the different eras of Batman and the mythos of Batman. So it's really funny because you have, one is telling about almost like that 1950s quirky kind of Batman, where it's the one-liners back and forth and, holy for holies, Batman. And, Robin with the high shorts and everything. And then you have the Return of the Dark Knight, which is interesting because they created that in this series, probably not thinking they would ever do anything again, not knowing that they would actually get to make the Return of the Dark Knight, the animated movie. But this was definitely the prelude to this.
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes. I think it's a really good one. I think it's funny. I even love, which is really funny too, Steve, because even in some of the alternate universes of Batman, when the kids are like, I heard he's like a giant bat, and he picks people up with his talons, and he's like, scream. It's like, and they're like, reality check. That's not Batman. It's like, in some of the comics, that's Batman.
yeah, right. Which would be another villain, actually, Man-Bat. But
Man-Bat,
funny.
Right.
This is a good one too. Yeah, this is an underrated one. I don't think a lot of people go back and watch this. And now that you say that, when I was rewatching this as well, you're right. I mean, it's like, man, this was the prelude to the Dark Knight, right? Dark Knight Returns, because you just didn't know if Batman was going to succeed in the 90s, so you were just throwing everything at the wall and hoping that, it would catch on. And yeah, dude, this was another one, especially after, I mean, like you said, this is technically Batman the Animated Series, but it's lost kind of its like luster at this point, a lot of people would say, and there weren't a lot of great episodes around that time. The animation had changed, but this one was a really good one.
Luke, what do you think about Legends of the Dark Knight?
I like this one. And obviously because of the different art styles, like you said, this era, this was post after they made the Superman show. And so like basically Batman and Superman were writing like concurrently on the WB. And so the the animation had kind of gotten a downgrade, and then, but at the same time, Batman had like moved away from this sort of like
Dark-esque.
yeah, or like the noir from the original
Mhm.
series, and it kind of become more overtly modern. Though
It was
it's
blended with
still
the Superman animated series.
yeah, it blended in with
Yeah.
the Superman. But there was still a lot of it to kind of like hint that this still was sort of the same universe. Then again, with the animated, it was always kind of like it sort of could have been the same, could have not. It never contradicted itself though. And that universe, what's important about it is that would then bleed into what would become the Justice League
Mhm.
universe. Which in turn would probably be like the catalyst for DC like throwing out like so many animated series after animated movies after that, which is really the highlight of the 2000s. And it was not only the highlight of the 2000s, but it then became a bright spot when the live action movies became so down. We could always be like, DC knows how to do. They know how to do movies. They're just straight to DVD and animated.
And
That's-
animated.
Yeah.
And this was
they're
directed
there,
by.
they're just-
They're there, yeah. This was
there's
directed
also,
by. Go ahead, Luke. Sorry.
There's also just a small kind of like mean line in this episode too, because at one point one of the kids talks about Batman, and he does a kind of like flamboyant flair about like how Batman would be. About how like I don't know exactly what I forget exactly what he says, but he says something like more or less kind of flamboyant, a kind of effeminate, and they're like, "Whatever, Joel." Basically, they were trying
Yeah.
to be like, they're like, "Joel, stop making Batman gay."
Yeah. Yeah, no, the 1950s one. That was the one they were talking about when his uncle was telling the story, because there's even a part in the story where he's also like, my uncle was like, he's like, I better keep on my toes. He's like, keep on his toes.
Yeah.
He said that out loud.
Yeah, that's good.
This was directed by Dan Reba, written by Robert Goodman. Story was done by Bruce Timm, and the music was done by Shirley Walker. I want to point this out too. Batman the Animated Series had an orchestra done musically, and it is fantastic. It is one of the premier aspects of what makes Batman the Animated Show so good, is the music of it. Especially to the first 3 seasons. The introductions are always done with their own theme, from like when it's Leather Wings, or Fear the Scarecrow episodes. They always have a different theme to the opening episode. Okay, so let's go ahead and move into the next episode for number 16, which I actually felt had to be added. This was actually one on my list. This was Mad Love, and this is also from the new Batman Adventures, just like Luke was saying in the previous episode. This was when they changed animations and everything, but this is the telling of the origin story of Harley Quinn, adapted from the comic book one shot of the same name. Was also written by Paul Dini and illustrated by Bruce Timm. This is the last episode that aired of the series, marking the end of the whole show. But basically, essentially, the story of Harleen Quinzel when she was a therapist at Arkham, and basically how the Joker manipulated her mind and turned her into Harley Quinn. And it's a really interesting episode because this is one of the more adulty ones, because she's clearly trying to have sex with the Joker in the beginning in the pie, because she gets in a pie and basically is pretty much naked underneath it. And talking about cream pies and tasting her pie and everything like that, only for the Joker to get really pissed off. And so she thinks the one thing to do is get rid of Batman, because he's in the way of their mad love. So she ends up getting Batman pretty much, as he even says it in the episode, pretty close. He's like, she almost had me here. He's like, but I knew that she would call you, and basically you wouldn't let no one else kill me. And this is an episode that shows the abuse of the Joker. On Harley Quinn, and the circle of, again, mad love that they have between each other. I love this episode. I think it's really good, especially if you're a Harley Quinn fan. I had to bring it up because, we'll point the episode later on, which is the most essential part of Harley Quinn. But this is one of the more cornerstone stories that makes Harley Quinn Harley Quinn.
Yeah, definitely her origins that not a lot of people like know about her being a therapist and the Joker manipulating her from the beginning. I just love how he keeps Harley Quinn after this because of that type of tool that he's like, well, I already have, I can always have a tool in the bag in Harley Quinn to go out there and basically go get Batman, go get Robin, you know what I mean? Go do this. And he's always abusive to her.
Mm-hmm.
And then he like laughs it off because it's like, well, this is all a joke and you're part of the act. And it's good because Harley Quinn's character also believes in that. In a way. Yeah,
right.
you know what I mean? She hates that he abuses her. She does go like, "Oh my god, like why would you, blah blah blah." But then like as soon as he starts laughing, so does she. Like, "Oh yeah, it is just part of the joke." So it's good. This is like the quintessential like Harley Quinn that everybody aspires to be. With all the new age Harley Quinn that you're seeing now, Suicide Squad and everything else. This is kind of the genesis of like this modern day Harley Quinzel that we see Harley Quinn.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, and to jump on to Steve's point, yeah, Mad Love, that the origin of Harley and Joker, that's been sort of central, and obviously the Harley Quinn show on on HBO, that totally builds off of Harley disassociating herself from that abusive relationship, and it's a huge part of the discourse around Harley Quinn and the Joker as characters. Is it appropriate these days to have this kind of relation, to have this dynamic? Is the Joker a fun character anymore because of that? And I think it's also a very fun full circle for the character because Mad Love was based off of a one-shot comic. And so to see sort of Harley Quinn go from the show and then finally making way into comics, and then now the animated series is now adapting a comic of her, kind of shows you how far that has come. When, again, Harley was just introduced as a minor sidekick in the animated series, but they really were drawn to the voice actors, which we've talked about on this show.
Arlene Sorkin.
Yeah.
Arlene Sorkin. And since then she has exploded and grown. It's probably one of the most popular female characters, at least especially
almost
in
as big as the Joker.
Almost
Probably,
as big as the Joker, certainly.
Definitely of all time.
I would say in the same way that Harley Quinn, obviously came from the Joker, I would say, the Joker is as much tied to Harley Quinn as well these days. You can't,
Right.
Yeah, he's fully associated with her. When he wasn't for a very long time, he was just a Joker. Yeah.
I also want to point out too, Mad Love was done by Butch Lunick, Paul Denny, Bruce Timm, and Shirley Walker did the music. Number 15, and this was a pick from Steve. This is Day of the Samurai. It was the 55th episode of Batman the Animated Series. Basically, it's kind of, Steve, why don't you take it away on this one here? Because I know it's the story of Bruce Wayne basically talking about his arch rival essentially in his training over the years.
So yeah, I like this episode just because like I wanted to get an episode where you see Bruce Wayne training to become Batman. That's always a quintessential, like a little bit of more into the origin story of him. And like you said, man, like he's basically training in I forget, I think it's Japan.
It's Japan, yeah.
Yeah, in Japan, and he's kind of helping out his sensei master, whatever you want to call him, and the sensei's daughter, and he was like,
of course,
yeah, she was kidnapped by like the rival of Batman, this like madman type of like dude, and he was like, oh, you don't know how to face me, come face me. And that was really based on like Batman fully embracing becoming Batman, because he's just Bruce Wayne in this episode, which is interesting. It's Bruce Wayne learning to become Batman, learning the ins and outs of not just martial arts, but learning like, okay, this is how you save a person, because she's used as the experiment I saw as like, this is how I'm going to be able to save people when I get back to Gotham. Like, I have to get dark. I have to get gritty.
It's Kodai, too. That's who he's fighting. It's Kodai.
Kodai, yeah. And you have to like understand the natures of the villains and kind of be a villain yourself in a way to, trump them, like they gotta fear me type deal. And I thought this was a pretty solid episode.
It's definitely a Batman background episode, which is, that's why it's on this list too, because it's one of the very few that you actually get to see kind of what, like you said, he's just Bruce Wayne here, and everyone pretty much just knows him as Bruce. But it's also, in a way, it's very Kill Bill-ish, the story itself.
Yeah, it is.
But it's still good though, because it's also it's kind of one of those stories that it has to be one of the very lessons that Batman has to learn to be Batman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think this is a good episode to put in here. Luke, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's actually because in the animated series, at least, we don't see a lot of Bruce's training.
Right.
And he just jumps into Batman. And for our younger audiences, you may not be aware, it used to be a time with superheroes that the superhero just showed up and we accepted that they could do whatever. We didn't need to explain their origin story 5 separate times in different mediums. Just in case you weren't sure how Batman got to be Batman.
You didn't care. You're just like, he's Batman, let's go. It
used to just be like, hey guys, here's Batman. He fights crime.
Right.
No. We used to, but at some point they're like, we have to explain to everybody that his parents died. And if we don't tell them that his parents died, they're not going to get it. They're not going to get why it's so cool to watch Batman.
But this is one of those rare times Batman is actually training.
Yeah.
So training, and then having his cowl off too. That's why I was like, man, this is an interesting episode where, you always either see Bruce Wayne or you see Batman. Usually in the bulk of this show, you never really get to see Bruce Wayne / Batman as one, and then like fighting an enemy and learning to become what he is. I thought it was an interesting one.
So this episode was done by Steve Perry. It was written by Steve Perry and directed by Bruce Timm. So let's go ahead and move on to number 14, which was a Luke pick, actually, which was Bane. That's right. So this is the one where they basically hired Bane to come and basically kill Batman.
Yeah.
But it's also a little bit more than that. Bane tries to actually take over like all the syndicate though in Gotham and stuff, and not to mention too, he's obviously Brazilian, which is interesting because this would not play out never ever again in any other medium. So Luke, I'm interested to hear, why did you pick this episode number 14 to be on the best?
First and foremost, it is a loose adaptation of Nightfall. Where the same thing happens, where Bane shows up, he tries to take over, and then he specifically he quote unquote breaks the bat. They couldn't do that in this series, but they do fuck up Batman quite a good deal. With this, for me, I just like the simplicity of this story, the introduction of this classic villain, who shows up and has a very simple motive, wants to defeat Batman. For me, the thing that like
only
always
appearance too. This is only appearance. Well, no, in this animated series.
Yeah, in this animated, yeah.
But to me, it's like the one thing is like the way Batman defeats Bane, just with the venom, the way he overloads the venom. It's one of the craziest shots in the series. It's just so it's so violent. It doesn't quite match up. Like there's another one in the list later on of a Batman villain getting just like uber fucked up, which is a little bit more graphically intense. But like this one always kind of stands up there for me. I love the introduction, and I was always kind of just fascinated. I didn't, because I did not know Bane that well from the comics as a little kid, so having a Latin American villain was kind of cool. So
that's blasphemous.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just kidding, everybody. So let's go ahead and move into. Let me go ahead and mention who did this story here. It was done. Writers were Mitch Bryan, Bob Kane, and Gene McCurdy. And was directed by Kevin Altery. So this next one is actually Steve brought this one to the table, and I'm happy he did, because I actually kind of forgot about this one, because maybe it was because it was so traumatic.
Yeah.
In this episode, and this is going to be number 13 for us, which is Over the Edge.
Yeah.
This episode is almost it's part of the new
Yeah.
Batman adventures, and it's one of the few episodes where all the members are in one episode, but it's just insane. It's basically almost the destruction of Batman,
Pretty
Yeah.
much, dude.
and it's done by the Scarecrow, and Scarecrow basically murders a Batgirl, and because it's Jim Gordon's niece, he automatically knows who Batman is, and it is just one of the most insane stories, alternate universes, whatever you want to call it, to
Yeah.
end up just being a dream
Yeah.
by by Barbara, because of the Scarecrow's potent venom. But it
Yeah,
is
fear toxic.
one of the most craziest one, because this one, I feel like when I watched this one and I saw this episode when I watched it again, I feel like this is one of those episodes that kind of like, it was like all gloves are off. It's like we're
Yeah.
done pretending here. It was like if everything like fell flat on its ass, what would
Yeah.
happen in this world? And it's like Jim Gordon would be like, "No, I know who Batman is. Straight up, I've known." Like, it's
Yeah.
and it's such a good. It was the 11th episode, but and this is also when Scarecrow was redone, and he was terrifying.
Oh,
was-
yeah.
dude,
He
this
had
is
the
my
noose
favorite.
around his neck.
Yeah.
Yeah, best
Most
Scarecrow.
of the redesigns, they really scaled them back, so the designs weren't as good. Scarecrow was the only exception. Scarecrow was like legit freaky.
Yeah,
So-
and he had so many redesigned Scarecrow, and this is
Right.
the scariest one.
So, what did you guys think of this episode?
Dude, I loved it. This is probably, it's got to be one of the most darkest episodes of Batman animated series, like in history,
Dark.
pretty much. I mean, it's, dude, like you said the exact same thing I was gonna say. It's the Jim Gordon response. Like, I've known who Batman was.
Right.
Like, I knew who
Gloves
he,
are off.
the glove is off. Like, I don't care. I just love to see the anguish in these, again, heroes, and they're human, so you see these sides of people of, like you just said, Rob, like, this is how you break the Batman. You want to beat Batman, you get to him like this, and this is how you make him truly suffer, and suffer for a great deal. Like, you can beat him all you want, but I mean, hey, give it up to Scarecrow, man. He really got to Batman in this, and yeah, it's a dream, but still just having that happen and seeing this episode. I remember as a kid, dude, it almost kind of made me feel cold. I was just like,
Yes, this episode was one of those episodes you watch when you're a kid and you're like, I don't want that episode to come on again. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
dude, I know.
Like,
It's like
that
you
was
sit-
not
like,
fun.
no, I didn't like that.
Luke, what did you think about this episode?
It was extreme. Very good episode, and has a great, and it pulls you in too right at the beginning, because like at the beginning you see the cops, they're chasing Nightwing and Batman and Robin into the Batcave, and you're like, what the hell is happening here? It's so
Mhm.
it goes, and and again, we don't realize it's the fear toxin until the very, very last few seconds.
Right.
It's like, we think like, Jesus, did they just kill Batgirl then?
Right.
You're like, where are we going forward with this?
Yeah.
So it was a whole lot. Obviously cheaped out, but not by being, but obviously it's a kid show.
Yeah, it's
Like,
right.
though I guess if you were a little bit older at the time, you may have been convinced that because this was the later series, you weren't,
Last episode.
you were like, we're
Right.
nearing the end, the final episodes. It's like, is this how we wrap up the series? Is it like,
Mhm.
but in the end, no, not necessarily.
Right.
Yeah, very good episode.
Directed by Yushirio Yano, written by Paul Denny, and that was it for that one. This next one, we're talking about terrifying. This one also scared me in the early years of the animated series. Number 12 is House and Garden. This is the one where Poison Ivy basically convinces everyone that she has changed and turned over a new leaf, and she marries this guy called Professor Carlisle and settles down. But basically what ends up happening is there's a series of rich like wards, such like Robin, or being kidnapped by these like bipedal monsters. And Batman investigates her the whole time in this episode and finds nothing. And, basically is almost convinced himself as well that Poison Ivy has turned over a new leaf, and then it comes to find out that she is actually hatching these like pod children,
Demon
and
babies.
she's like mixed her DNA with Carlisle, the guy who she's with, and basically she's made like almost this artificial family. And she even says to them in the show, she's like, I did want a family, just on my terms. And it's one of the times you get to see like how serious Poison Ivy can actually be outside of just simply kissing and poisoning guy like she does with Harvey Dent in the episode, which is basically her origin episode. But this one was one of the ones where I was like, this is crazy. Like, I was like Batman in this episode when he sees the pod and he drops the light and he's like, I was like, that's exactly how I felt too watching it. And I just wanted to say for this one too, the animation of this one was spectacular when Poison Ivy comes down on her vines down and like is riding on it. Oh my God. I thought that was like one of the greatest animated sequences I've seen.
At the time,
even rewatching it now, actually, I think
cool.
it still looks good. So what do you guys think of this episode, House and Garden?
Yeah, this is an underrated episode, man. I feel like I was like, man, I forgot about this one. 'Cause it's one of those episodes again. It's like you watch it one time and then it's like what she had I couldn't comprehend this as a kid. Like this is one of those episodes. So it's like, well, how did she had a child with a plan, or like how did that work? I don't really know. And then when you watch it now as an adult, you're like, oh man, that's messed up. Because as a kid,
crazy shit with plants, man.
With plants, dude. It's like you could do all of that with just like cells of another human being. I just watched it and be like, that was weird. I'm gonna go play Super Nintendo now. It's like, well, now as an adult, I'm like, that was just like kind of screwed up a little bit.
Yeah.
Luke, what did you think of this episode?
This was like this harkens to a lot of like those suburban horror films of like, what's secretly going on under, and it's like to a T. It's like, oh, happy family, everybody, like what's going on under the surface. And so you don't see, like, again, we go back to a lot. What's so good about Batman is the way it can stay very vibrant and very pulpy and very superhero-y while also getting dark. Because I would say this is like as much as a horror episode as you can do for kids before.
This was dark.
This is super dark. Yeah.
So excellent. And again, Poison Ivy really is one of like she's a great. She's just a great Batman villain because she's one of the few that has like superpowers.
Yes.
And so, but of the other superheroes in the world, she fits perfectly with the Batman universe. She's an interesting foil against Batman because she is so focused on like the environment. She's so focused on like essentially she has a vague sense of revenge against humanity for both what they did to her and what she thinks and what they are doing to the planets.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, over time, the crazy thing about Poison Ivy is that she's become less and less of a villain, more of an anti-hero.
Mm-hmm.
Purely just because what she does as a villain is outweighed by how much of society has now gone on board with her. It's like, you know what? Like, if you're robbing banks and you're like terrorizing a couple of people, that's fair if you think you're trying to like, stop the environmental eco-terrorism of the rich.
Yeah.
All right, so let's. That episode was done by Paul Denny, and it was directed by Boyd Kirkland. The next episode, number 11, I thought was another good, fun one to add. Was Almost Got Him, which was from season 1, episode 35, which is basically the story of 7 villains of Batman's Rogue Gallery, telling the story of how they almost got him, the closest they've come to killing Batman. This is another fun episode. but it also gives me a chance to also tell my story that I've been wanting to tell forever about this episode too. It ends basically with Batman saving Catwoman, and you kind of see the relationship that Batman has with Catwoman in this animated series as well, because the Joker essentially it's almost like done in real time. The Joker starts telling the story of like, oh well, I got him actually right now, and like so that's what's going on with that one. I like this episode too because at the very end, what ends up happening is after they all tell their stories, Croc ends up, there's a moment where Croc interrupts their conversation, and he gets to tell his story, and he goes, "There I was, in the dark, and here comes Batman," and they're like, "Yeah, and what happened?" He's like, "I threw a rock at him," and they just kind of like, whatever, okay, and he's like, "It was a big rock." But what makes it funny is at the very end of this episode is Croc is actually Batman. So I always wondered if Batman was legitimately making conversation and was like, I'm going to tell the story of how Croc literally almost got me. And it's like, what if that was the most, because Batman's prepared for everything if you think about it. Except for a goddamn basic rock being thrown at him.
And he can't. What gadget's gonna break a rock? In time. That's interesting. That's an interesting point where it's like, did Batman just legit like tell them like the Killer Croc out of every villain almost killed me, and I just told them the truth?
So what do you guys think about this episode?
It's funny, man. This is a funny one. I think this is a good one. I like the premise. This is a good premise episode where having all the villains like talk about how like, no, I almost got him. No, and they're like arguing. And I just love how Joker again is so, you could just see how him leaps and bounds. Like, watching it as an adult, you could just see he's like, these guys are morons, and I know what's going on, and I just think it's funny. It's part of the game. It's part of the joke. I love this. I know he's in this room, but I'm gonna let it play out because again, it's the never-ending game between me and him, and I'm using all of them kind of as pawns. That's what I kind of got from the Joker as well, because again, he's constantly smiling through the episode. I don't know if you guys saw that. He's not cheating. Like cheating. And he's cheating, which is like, again, he's like, gotta spice it up somehow. That's what I'm looking at it like. I'm like, this guy knows in the beginning, and he's just thinking it's hilarious.
What did you think of this episode, Luke?
It reminded me a lot of Legends of the Dark Knight, where we're learning about Batman from the perspective of other characters, and that's always a fun aspect and an interesting perspective when you're looking at it, like from the perspective of people who live in Gotham, and especially, and in this case, all of the villains who regularly encounter Batman.
Right.
The sense of like of who Batman is, how the way he doesn't seem like a real person, almost like a force, the way he always seems to win for against them. It's
because at first they're talking about they think he's a robot, they think he's a monster.
They don't get it. They're like, how is he always? Which again, I think is an interest, which kind of puts it into perspective and why people like things like superheroes or especially Batman, because the idea that he's just a guy and yet he's always defeating people who maybe outclass him in terms of raw abilities and like strength and superpowers, but he always wins, which of course it carries over to the Justice League, where just Batman like always has the upper hand. He pin him up against Superman, always gonna win. He's Batman. It's always going to win. Batman. It gets, and culturally, that's gotten a little ridiculous to some degree. But in this case, with Almost Got Him, it's in a sort of a grounded and decent and good way. And this is often cited as one of like the top episodes usual. And again, because, and ironically, it is again not a story starring Batman. It is a story about Batman.
All right, so this one was also written by Paul Dini and directed by Eric Radomski. Sorry. Okay, so the next one is actually a fun one too. Actually, number 10 is actually it is fun because it's the introduction of a villain. This is the Clock King.
Clock King.
Yes, this was the story of Temple Fugit, who is basically a real uptight timekeeper, basically a guy who sticks to his time, and he basically meets the mayor before he was the mayor of Gotham, and basically he's uptight and he's nervous, and he's like, yeah, I got a big case. If it's gonna ruin my company if I don't show up. And long story short, the mayor tells him at the time, well, the councilman at the time tells him like, hey, instead of going to, he's like, do you take your coffee break? He's like, yep, 3 o'clock on the dot. He's like, go at 3:15. And basically, he does it, and it throws him off to the point of where his whole day is ruined.
Ruined, yeah.
And he loses his case. And basically he goes bankrupt, loses his company, and then he shows up again to embarrass the mayor, essentially. But this guy is a different kind of villain for Batman. He's a guy that's literally 2 steps ahead of him the entire time. Yeah. I mean, from punching Batman. I mean, there's a great scene where Batman's gets trapped, and he's all like, "Oh, and by the way, Batman," he's like, I decided just to suck the oxygen out of the room, so that would get, and it takes 15 minutes more time than you can with your torch." And he's all like, "And don't bother trying to," and Batman's over there gonna touch the bomb, and he's like, "And don't bother touching the bomb." He's like, "Because it's a vibration sensitive this," and he's like, "But you can blow yourself up if you want to." And he's jumping off buildings, and he's like, "The 3 o'clock train always arrives 2 minutes late."
Right.
And he even times Batman's punches, which is even crazier. So he knows virtually everything in the time aspect. Of course, like every other villain, doesn't get away with it. But this is a guy that would come back later on, though. But I like this episode. What do you guys think about the Clock King? Underrated villain.
That's exactly why I did it. I was like, this is one of the villains that actually outwits Batman and everything. Because no one really outwits Batman. It's always just they're overpowering him, or, they catch him off guard. But this guy, I found this one so interesting. It's like, yeah, he was completely one step ahead of him. And like you said, Rob, again, the train scene was hilarious. He jumps off and he jumps right on the train. Batman's looking down. He's like, dang, this dude just got me. Like he's one step ahead of me, and I don't like that kind of. I like when you see Batman get like frustrated, not like, oh God, they got away. Darn, I'll get him. He was like pissed. He's like, this guy is like one step ahead of me. I don't like that.
Luke, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, I'm a fan of Clock King. I don't have much else to say on that. I like the episode. So.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I mean, it is a villain origin story episode, so that's why it's up here. But it's one of the more unique villains that people don't really know about. And he's actually, what I always tell people, is a realistic villain. A villain they could actually put in the movies that would actually work. Because he's, he doesn't have gadget. He just is insane about keeping time and knowing time.
It's like Twilight Zone meets Batman. It's like this guy could be in the Twilight Zone. You know what I mean? The Clock King. It's like, oh, I do everything punctual and everything. One thing gets off, then everything is ruined. And I wanted to turn back. Why don't you put one of that guy, just throw him right into a Batman world? What would he do? Going against Batman, Right. It's weird. It's a weird one.
So this was directed by Kevin Alternati, written by David Wise, Martin Pasco, and Bob Kane. So that was a good episode. So the next one is one of my favorite episodes. It is one of the more comedic episodes. And again, as Luke was pointing out, an episode that's more about Batman than it is, about characters talking about Batman, which is going to be number 9, The Man Who Killed Batman. And this is a great episode because it's the story of basically an essential low-ranking mobster who they call, named Sidney, and they call him the Squid. But basically, he's the peon guy. He's the lookout guy. Everyone makes fun of him. And through some crazy, and the episode even starts out with him talking to the lead boss and everything. And what's funny is he starts telling the story about he basically killed Batman. And not only did he kill Batman, but he ends up starting a fight between like bikers and his gang. And then he ends up going toe to toe against the Joker and essentially getting one over on the Joker. And I want people to see it, so I'm not going to tell you too much because it's hilarious. Because this guy is basically, he's like a Mr. Magoo character, just stumbling his way through this entire episode. And the payoff of it is so so great because when he's actually talking to the head boss, he's just like, he's like, so that's why I need your help. This is why I need you to help me out. And he's just like, this is what he's telling Thorne, and he's just like, right. He's like, right. He's like, so you can move in on my operation? And he's like, what? He's like, no one is that lucky or stupid.
Yeah.
You think I'm stupid? And it's one of those great episodes where Batman uses someone to get to the head of the mystery. And it's just a great caper of an episode, but it's funny too because Batman actually helps him in the end. Batman actually lets him, think he almost took out Batman in a way and tells everyone that. So it's one of those funny ones. What do you guys think about this episode?
I agree, man. I don't have too much to say about this one other than the Mr. Magoo comment is so funny because it really is. It is so Mr. Magoo and them getting pissed. Like, how did you beat him? They're just so upset.
Yeah.
Like, who the hell are you?
The Joker part is hilarious. When the Joker is telling the story, he's like, there's a certain kind of rhythm to these things when he's actually doing the robbery with them. And he's like, I have some feeling he's not really coming because of you. And then he even puts on a funeral for Batman. And he's just,
in the casket.
He's like, the day the clown cried. And of course, Joker is done by Mark Hamill, and he will always be the original Joker. And he is just classic in this episode. And it's so funny. He's like, I'll feel better when we put that man there into that box there and put that box into that thing of acid there. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this episode.
Yeah, man, it was. I think this is one of the another one where it's a great. This is like a great weekly episode. If you saw this like live when it premiered, you're just like, damn, that was a good one. I like this one. It was just a unique episode. Like I wish that they would kind of go with this more, like in another vein. Like it's a good premise, so you could do a lot with this.
Luke, what'd you think of this episode?
Yeah, it's a really good one. And again, about Batman. And again, Sid never shows up again. He's just like a one-off character.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, I like episodes like this where it's not built around necessarily built around a recurring supervillain. It's like there are a lot of ones we didn't get in this. We didn't get on the list, but there are a lot of great episodes of Batman just like fighting crime. Just like solving mysteries and fighting like just crime. Which we don't see a lot of, and so this is a great example of that of that going on.
Right, I love this episode too. I think it's good. Written by Paul Dini and was directed by Bruce Timm. The next one is one of the more sadder episodes, and I think we're going to start to get in the real dark episodes here on this list. This one was actually a two-parter known as Feet of Clay. This is the story about an actor, basically, named who basically depends on this cream done by this guy named Roland Daggett.
Yeah.
And basically it's real sad because he gets so reliant on this cream. He starts doing jobs for these guys and basically they decide to wipe him out, and they pour the cream in which he uses to on him, and the actor's name is Matt Hogan. And basically it also starts off as a crime against Lucius Fox because he thinks like Bruce is trying to like meet him. But basically, it's Matt Hogan. That's how good of an actor he is and how he's working for the mob. But basically, they put this cream on him, and he turns into one of the most iconic characters, I would say, ever in Batman, which is Clayface. But it's also, you could relate this episode to almost drug addiction in a lot of ways. I mean, this guy is like fully dependent. And it's sad because he was in a car accident, and his face became so mangled. And so he relied on this. He relied on this cream to do some of his best roles, and basically now he doesn't have it, and that life is over. And it's, again, like I said, it could be a story linked to addiction, but it's very sad. And Clayface is one of those sad characters, I think. I mean, he is one of the strongest characters ever in the Batman gallery, but he's also a very sad character that you can feel bad for in a way.
Yeah, man. I think he's one of the more relatable characters in all of the Batman universe, and his story is so sad because again, he didn't even want to use the cream at work at first. Remember, he was like, nah, like, I don't know, and blah blah blah. But then he knew, like, okay, my acting career is dying out. I mean, look at acting now. How many people have had so many surgeries and done so many different experimental things to themselves with no consequence? You know, they didn't care about the consequences. They just wanted to stay out on top. So did Daggett here. It's just so sad. And then this is another like
the end is sad when he shows him all the screens of himself and he starts morphing
into it to be like, and he can't hold it for long. So he's just like, it's just so sad. Yeah, it's so sad, dude, because like it's also dark as all hell. Like where the mob catch him and they force him to drink the thing, the stuff. As a kid, I was just like, oh my God. What is it gonna do to him? And then obviously you see that Clayface, and it was a marvelous like reveal of Clayface too. Like it was a slow burn to you seeing what he's gonna look like. Yeah, it was a classic one. I love this one.
So we had to wait like a whole week to finish this episode when we were kids.
Yeah,
to see what the conclusion was.
To see what he looked like, how it was gonna end, because you're just like, oh no, it's a 2-parter.
Yeah, Luke, what'd you think of Feet of Clay?
Yeah, this is a good, and really, and you know, and really creepy too, especially when Clayface, starts to emerge, or at the end when he's, forced to ingest all of it and then becomes Clayface. Very creepy. I had mentioned earlier that Bane was one of a couple of like really horrific sort of like villains getting fucked up, and Clayface has one of the key ones at the end of his arc when he gets confronted and he sees the TV screens and he's hitting himself and he gets and he just starts morphing and shifting.
Stop it.
I believe, hold on. That actually was an anime company that worked on just that scene, TMS Entertainment. They actually were the ones responsible for that specific scene. They contracted it out. When Clayface starts like shifting around,
it was a crazy scene.
It's a crazy ass scene. So yeah, this is a great episode. Clayface again, another one of the few villains with powers in the Batman canon,
but still can't beat Superman. I said, but still can't beat Superman.
Still can't beat Superman.
So the next one I think is a really good one too. Number 7, this one, and we're getting to some of the better homage episodes, some of the better canon episodes. This one is one of one of my favorites. Number 7 is Beware the Grey Ghost. This one actually is awesome because not only did it star Batman, but it also has Adam West in it, the original Batman. And if anyone didn't know, at the time when this came out, that was the old school Batman, pretty much. That was pretty much the only Batman that was really around besides the 1950s ones. So it's an interesting episode too about a washed out actor who's basically selling all his memorabilia to stay alive, or basically to survive. And basically there's these crimes that are starting to happen in Gotham that are just like one of the episodes of the Grey Ghost. And Batman used to watch the Grey Ghost, and he goes to the actor and goes to the actor and basically is like Trent, and is like, help me figure that out. And they go on a big mystery, and it's another one-off villain, basically a guy who's basically called the Mad Bomber, and he's basically trying to do it with toys and race cars. But it's so cool because you can see there's a lot of homage to the original Batman with Adam West, because Adam West is even saying certain things in the episodes, like, I did so many of those things, I don't remember how it happened anymore, and leave me alone.
Super meta.
It very much so. And it almost feels like at the time when he did it, like this, it almost came off as almost cynical. Adam West did.
Almost, because he wasn't like feigning it for. I mean, it's campy, but it's like serious camp because he wasn't.
It's serious campy. And when he helps Batman, I love the ending too. He's like, I love the Grey Ghost was always a hero of mine. Harking back to the original Batman. He's like, really. I love that.
Yeah. I like it. Do you guys like Batman being a fanboy in this episode? Because that's all he was.
Yeah, I do. Honestly, This also goes to a larger point with stuff like superhero movies. Is like I always wonder, like what TV shows do these guys watch? Like I get that they don't have a lot of time, but like Like superheroes never watch TV. They don't have favorite movies. I don't know if we've ever mentioned like they rarely mention like favorite books, favorite songs. So the fact that Batman has like a show that he has watched, that he likes watching a show, that's something that other Batman don't have. We don't.
That's true.
Because again, like even Navy SEALs watch movies. Like
right.
Batman sitting up watching Real Housewives. That's what we need.
Right? Yeah.
And real quick, I just want to mention too that Feet of Clay was done by Marv Wolfman, Michael Reeves, and it was directed by Dick Sebastian, Kevin Altery. So, let's move on to the Great Ghost was actually directed by Boyd Kirkland, and the story was done by Dennis O'Flaherty and Tom Ruger, and the teleplay was done by Garen Wolfe and Tom Ruger. So, Luke, the next one was actually one of the picks that you had.
Yes.
And I'm actually very interested to hear this one. And it is actually one of my favorite episodes, too. It's called Harley's Holiday.
Harley's Holiday, yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So I'm going to let you go ahead. Let me just tell basically the story of Harley Quinn getting out of Arkham. And she's basically having a caper and having fun. And basically she encounters Batman. And it's kind of funny. It's one of those episodes where she kind of works with Batman in a way.
A little bit.
So I'm gonna let you take this one, Luke. Why is this one on our top 20 here?
Yeah, hold on. That's what I thought. Yeah, because
of course Arlene Sorkin is Harley Quinn in this episode as well, and one of her breakout episodes as well.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think this is. I would say to me this is the start. This also Harley and Ivy, which isn't on this list. Also kind of set the trajectory for where we would see her now. But this one is this one is because Harley decides to get out, and then along the way, because of a misunderstanding, she starts to go back to her old ways, and it isn't even her.
I think she's still in a dress.
They think she's stealing a dress. It's not her fault. She'd already paid for it. The security guard comes up to her. All they want to do is take off the security tag, and then she gets defensive, and it spirals, and it's sad, and obviously it's very goofy. It has a kind of cartoon logic, the way Harley just keeps getting into more and more trouble. But it is very sad because ultimately Harley was getting better, and then ultimately has to go back to Arkham after everything. But it does, at the end of it, kind of emphasizes a side of Batman that the modern movies do not do enough of, in which Batman kind of comforts Harley. We get a side of Batman where he has a vested interest in making sure that Harley at some point gets better. Because especially in this animated series specifically, the Batman villains are often tragic, and they're often victims of circumstance that then spiral. And so in this series at least, when Batman doesn't kill, there is a real more justified sense to it, that he actually does believe that these people can be helped. It has gotten out of hand, obviously, in cartoons. It's like, you really probably should have just killed the Joker at some point. Let's guys, I get where we're going with this. I get the dynamic. Realistically, he should be dead. But
this is a great episode, though.
Yeah. It's a great episode. It's very fun. And yeah, the fact that it focuses entirely on Harley. Joker has very little to do with it. I think it's stuff like this that endeared her to where she is now, where she's her own full-fledged character, independent of anybody else as well. So,
right. I thought it was a great episode too. Steve, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, I thought it was great too. I agree with Luke, where this is kind of like the precursor of where you see Harley Quinn now. I feel like again, because
the hyenas.
The hyenas. This has nothing to do with the list, but in the vein of Batman, they actually had a standalone, one of the many standalone Batman animated movies, and it was called Batman and Harley Quinn, and I felt like that movie transpired from this episode,
right? This is not the only time they worked together either.
No, it isn't. Right. And then her dealing with the Joker, and then her with the mask off. She has the suit on, right? I believe, but she doesn't have the makeup. Isn't that that's yeah? So yeah, I again, it's a great episode. I feel like it's good to kind of get people that didn't really know Harley Quinn, because at that point not gonna lie, I didn't really care about Harley Quinn as a kid. I was like, okay, what she shows up every now and then, but you want to see the Joker, and then this is the showcase episode that's like, no, we're gonna make you care a little bit,
right?
Yeah, make her fun. She's a fun character.
And this was written by Paul Dini and was directed by Kevin Altry. So the next one is this one was my personal add to the list. Number 5, which is going to be Mad as a Hatter, the story of Jervis Tech, who is in love with a woman named Alice at his work. And basically, she breaks up with her boyfriend at one point. He basically goes all out to try and make her fall in love with him. And this guy is very obsessed with Alice in Wonderland. And basically decides that, he's also working for Wayne Enterprise using manipulating brain waves and taking over people's minds. He's able to manipulate mind waves and increase the brain's potential. But he takes it to a very dark level. And this is one of the episodes where you can kind of relate to the villain very, 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 very much. And and it's also another story. Steve pointed this off air of like obsession, like guys who get like overly, it was like stocky obsession. But in a way too, I'm not gonna lie, it seemed like I watched the rewatch. It seemed like Alice really did put him on at one point, like really did.
She was playing with him not playing with him, but she let him on.
She and I said because she said, "What a sweet man!" And she's like, "I have 2 amazing men in my life." She said that to him at one point. You know what I mean? So she had to have known him for a while. But basically, it's a very sad episode in the way it ends because he's so obsessed with Alice in Wonderland in that story, and her name is Alice, and it has one of the most. This is another one of those themed episodes I talk about where they dive deep into like the theme of a villain. And this one is very over because he gets Batman into like an Alice in Wonderland theme park, and he's doing quotes from Alice in Wonderland like "Twinkle Twinkle Little Bat, how I wonder what you're at." And it's hilarious and sad at the same time because when Batman ultimately beats him, he confesses to Batman. He's one of the characters that's like, no, you can't take her away from me. I've waited my whole lonely life for her. And Batman's like, well, all you've wanted is a doll, because at this point he's just taken over her mind because he can't win her over any other way. And he's basically, again, as Luke was saying, this is a situation that's spiraled for this guy. And realistically, all he had to do was go take over the boyfriend's mind and just have him call her and say, hey, we're done, and that would have been the end of it. But he went too far. He went way too far in all of it.
Right.
But this is one of the endings I remember the most as a kid that was very sad because he gets crushed on the Jabberwocky, and then he looks as Alice is like in the arms of her boyfriend, and she looks at him and he's like looking, and she looks away, and he's like, could not go to the dance. And he tells that story. That was his favorite story in Alice in Wonderland. What do you guys think of Mad as a Hatter? I think this is a really deep episode in a way.
My man had blue balls, dude. He turned into
blue balls.
He was like, "Damn, man! All I wanted to just let me have to get one date. Do I have to fight Batman because you said no to me? Come on, like, give a dude a chance." And then you're leading me on, saying like I'm cool and you like me a little bit. I feel for him in a way, but then again, like you said, Rob, Batman's like, dude, you literally are controlling this girl's mind.
Yeah,
you are a psychopath. You know what I mean? Get help.
Yeah, you think of this episode, Luke?
Yeah, I would say the thing that strikes me is great visuals because of all the Alice in Wonderland stuff.
Oh, yeah, classic.
Great animation too. Probably the least creepy iteration of the Mad Hatter in Batman.
I agree with that.
That's saying something. Because it gets bad.
Yeah,
he gets bad in some versions. In some versions his Alice is a lot younger.
Is a lot,
and that's not fun. I mean, sure, we all want to watch Batman punch a pedophile, but but it stops. That's just something you really can't attach a Happy Meal toy to.
Right.
Yeah. Excellent episode.
All right, so the next one we have, and let me just mention too before we go, this episode was done by Paul Dini, Bob Kane, and Gene McCurdy, and was directed by Frank Parr. Of course, always starring Kevin Conroy as Batman. So this next episode I want to talk about was another one I added to the list because I think, and this is actually a sequel to Heart of Steel, which was another episode in the series. This is called His Silicone Soul, and this one is number 4. This episode is interesting because basically it's a sequel to an original episode about a computer trying to take an AI computer, I might add, trying to take over the world by duplicating people for robots. And basically he manages to duplicate Batman unknowingly to anybody else. And this robot comes out and thinks he's Batman until he actually manages to talk to Hardak, which is the name of the system. And then basically, but what's interesting about this episode is because the robot really thinks he's Batman at one point. So much so that he thinks when he kills Batman, and it goes so deep into the idea of Batman and who Batman is and his sense of justice, that the guy thinks he actually kills Batman, and he's like, I took a life. And so he must also die.
He freaks out,
And he freaks out. And it's one of those episodes where you get to see the contradictory nature of Batman, and it's also very terrifying too, because the original episode was so scary, but this one, to bring it back, also there's also the emphasis of the AI and the robot, not knowing that he is a robot because he thinks he's Batman, and he goes to his creator and he's like, I'm real, I'm Batman, and he's like, you're not Batman. He's like, don't you? And I remember this speech. He's like, don't you remember the last time you tasted good steak? He's like, and starts asking him all these questions, and he freaks out.
Yeah. That scared me as a kid, man. I'm not gonna lie.
What'd you think of this episode, Steve?
Yeah, that scared the shit out of me as a kid, man. I remember when, like, you see when he comes through and it, you could see the inner workings of the machine in his, like, stomach area and his abdomen, and then he has the face, like the child's play, like, half face thing going on. I was like, oh my god. I just love the fact that, again, as you watch this as an adult, he's like the Terminator. It's like, oh, did I just do something against my protocol? I must self-terminate. And you think, would Batman commit suicide if he killed another person? You know what I mean? If he truly killed somebody out of malice, like out of his control, he's killing himself. Is it because he didn't have control or because he killed somebody?
Right.
It's one of those episodes. I like that. I like the thinkers like that.
What do you think of this one, Luke?
It's real good, and I think it's always the interesting one. The tidbit about this came out a year after Terminator 2. So I think, like, a lot of episodes, you have to really think about. You have to think that was on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, definitely.
Like both this and Heart of Steel, like they both really emphasize that classic scene of, like, the half face of the human side, the metal skeleton. It's always kind of fun when they kind of get super wild with, like, Batman fighting a robot. Stuff like that always that stuff always comes out so interesting left field, outside of when they do more, like, traditional Batman villains or more, like, sort of crime noir. So to have something that's, like, kind of overtly science fiction is back then was rare. So
all right. Yeah, great episode. So that episode was done by Matt Eisenberg, Robert N. Skier, and Michael Reeves. It was directed by Bob Kirkland. The next one we're going to talk about is actually, I think, a really deep episode that kind of cuts to the core of Batman, the animated series. And this is going to be number 3, and this is going to be the episode I Am the Night, which is a very heavy episode because not only is it on the anniversary of Batman's parents' death, and he basically is delivering a rose to where they died, but it also is an episode about him giving doubts upon himself of being Batman. Luke, you mentioned this earlier, one of the lesser known villains that comes around, the Jazz Man, in this animated series. But not only that, I want to mention this episode too, because in this episode, Gordon gets injured and Batman has to save Gordon, and he realizes this is why he is who he is and why, the world needs him. This episode is interesting because this episode is very, very similar to the Red Hood episode. In the sense of, like, so when Gordon does get injured, basically it's almost like Batman gets upset. He goes down in the Batcave, starts shoving things down, and he even, like, almost does that speech, like he's like stupid and careless. Remember when Batman was, like, in the Red Hood's like stupid and careless, and he goes out to save Gordon. Not only that, but he also does the iconic, like you would see in the Red Hood movie. He throws the Batmarang in the Jazzman's pistol, and basically takes out his pistol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this episode reminded me a lot of the Red Hood, but also it's just a great episode about, like, why Batman is Batman and his, his will and his desire to keep going to do what he does.
Also, and him just being this is the quintessential Batman's just a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is just like, oh, what's Batman's greatest superpower? Well, he doesn't have one. Oh, well, he does. It's his will. Everyone always says it's his will. That's his superpower. Like, he has more wills than even people that have superpowers. But then you see him. He breaks a little bit. I like those episodes because it's funny because you see Batman like using this as like he's trying to get himself out of it immediately, but he can't.
Yeah.
He's dealing with emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also see Batman just straight out just being abusive. Like, people trying to help him out, and he just cannot have anybody, like, he does not want to lean on anybody's shoulder, so he's just like pissed all the time when he's upset. So it's like, yeah, dude, like, you got to be a human being, It's like, you are Bruce Wayne as well.
Uh-huh.
What do you think of this episode, Luke?
Yeah, very good. To me, the episode the most that strikes me is that beginning where, like, Batman just like he's just kind of done with it. He's questioning. I can't remember, even in modern comic media, superhero series, I cannot remember the last time they ever even approached the idea of depression in a genuinely realistic way. Because what Batman is going through is depression. He is
right.
He is clinically depressed, and it is actually genuinely affecting him. It's not that he's and so obviously he finds his will. He's spurred to action to do it. But I thought it was such a good. It's a good story. And again, it's the Jazzman, small time villain. This is a very crime oriented. Really, the focus is on like the internal struggle of Batman, the blame he puts on the responsibility he puts on himself to do what he does, and the pressure he's under. He puts himself under to always do as best as he can. And that's what Batman's all about, baby.
That's why I said it's a very deep episode.
That's a good pick.
Number 2 is actually one we all three kind of put on there. This is why it's going to be number 2 on our list, which is the Laughing Fish.
The Laughing Fish.
The Joker develops a toxin that mutates fish into the Joker's face, and basically he targets innocent people who refuse to give him copyright and new And basically, but not only that, this episode is so iconic because it was the first time you ever saw Harley Quinn as well. Yeah. This episode was the first introduction of Harley Quinn. It's also, I want to say, Batman being his most detective. You know what I mean?
He's trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, he's trying to figure out what's going on because it's really hilarious because you don't really know what the Joker's up to. And it's really funny because it's Mark Hamill. And, Mark Hamill's going around saying, but they look like my face and everything. It's they have and he's like, that Colonel gets those chickens and they don't even have mustaches and all. He makes some great jokes in here that are really funny. And scary when he actually does kill people in this one or intoxicates them or whatever. They have the iconic face.
The Rick, and there's a great interview I saw about about the writers and the animators. When they were going to do the series because it was a kid show. The executives were like, Joker can't kill people, even though by that point it was post 80s. Joker was well known as a much more homicidal character in the Batman comics. So they wanted to bring that energy, but they're like, Joker can't kill. Oh, this is also 89 too. So Joker killed people in the 89 movie. So it was like, well, we can't kill people, but we can do this laughing gas, which like makes people like freeze up. And this is what I mentioned earlier about like with the cartoon straddling that superhero-ness and the creepiness, because it's goofy. It's a bunch of it's a bunch of fish with stupid faces. Yeah. But then when people get it, it's horrifying. It's horrifying on comics.
It is.
It is.
And it's also that, like, it's the ingenuity of the animated series that, like, they had to work within very tight bounds. They had a very specific thing. They couldn't go overboard. They could not, they had a very limited, not limited, but they had a lot of restrictions on what Batman could do. And the animators and the writers worked so well within those bounds to, like, create a series that still stayed true to the spirit of Batman, still was able to stay dark, but most people would feel very comfortable showing their kids to still, even today.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just a classic episode. If you're like, what is a good episode to start with in Batman? This is a good episode to start with.
And it has the most iconic Joker laugh by Mark Hamill, actually. This is like, it's like, oh, that's just classic laughing Joker scene when he comes in, takes his hat off, he laughs. I was like, oh, dude, that's Batman right there,
And this one was directed by Bruce Timm, writers Paul Dini, Steve Englehart, Denny O'Neil, of course, Kevin Conroy as Batman. So number one is a very interesting one because we all collectively agree. And when we did this episode, we basically we showed our lists, basically.
Yeah.
And so this episode was really universally picked. And that is going to be number one is going to be Heart of Ice.
Oh, boy.
The origin story of one of the more iconic Batman villains, Mr. Freeze, and his story of vengeance. I'm actually I want to hear what you guys want to say because I want to know why we all collectively chose this episode. So Luke, I want to know why is this episode number one on the list?
So where I mentioned that the Laughing Fish is like a very quintessential animated episode, it's like this is the one that has all the things that are good about this series. If you watch that, you get the full. Heart of Ice is the example of why this series is still relevant, why still Head and Shoulders stands above many series even today. And there have been great DC animated series even now. From the movies, a lot of great series. Stuff like Heart of Ice is why this series is like still top tier, why still would rank number one. The character of Mr. Freeze up until this point had just been a simple, goofy gimmick. He has freeze rays. That's his whole thing. Heart of Ice took that character, created a fully tragic backstory.
Just like Batman's.
Like Batman.
Pretty much.
Very, very similar, and just created and the character, created great visuals with all of the ice.
Yes.
He became a threat that forced Batman to use his ingenuity in the series, and of course, with a very simple defeat with chicken soup at the very end.
Yeah,
cure for the common cold. So besides the writing being so tight, it all follows through. It's the gold standard of what you want to do when you are creating a new series, when you are bringing something from the fold that people are familiar with. This brought something so new that it is now officially canon. There's no other except, it's like, This is Mr. Freeze. This is who he is.
And everybody accepts it. Yep.
If you are and this to me is the great lesson for everybody moving forward who are going to adapt DC, who are going to adapt Marvel, who are going to adapt other superhero or comic book properties that will inevitably be either reboots or remakes or something. If you're going to do that, because you are inevitably going to change something, you make sure that change is worth it. And this one is a great example of that.
Yeah, Luke masterfully said exactly what I wanted to say on this episode, man. This episode, quintessentially, I mean, Mr. Freeze is my favorite villain, but I still to this day go like, he's not a villain, man. He's just a tragic man that has lost everything and no one will listen to him. Mm-hmm. So
he's going after the guys that basically killed his wife.
His wife, and Batman is in his way and he keeps Get the hell out of my way. I'm literally doing what you are doing on a nightly basis, okay?
Yeah.
Aren't you literally fighting crime because your parents got killed? Like, they killed my wife. Get out of my way so I can do justice. And I just love how, again, he is such a tragic soul and is so different and parallel to every Batman villain thus we've seen in the series up to this point and still afterwards, that he is so timeless. Like, just like Luke said, like, everybody has adapted. The comics have adapted. Shows and movies have adapted to this character. Well, minus Batman and Robin, but you get what I mean. Like,
he had that backstory about
yeah,
He had the backstory.
he had the back. I mean, with the one, he's not doing any one-liners here. You know, freezing. You didn't hear that here.
Yeah.
But
that's one thing the movie had over has over the anime.
yeah, what killed the
Welcome to the Ice Age.
Yeah, I know, right? That would, I think, kill Mr. Freeze right then. But yeah. I gotta tell you, this is one of the best episodes, if not, it's my personal best episode in Batman and the Animated Series for all the reasons Luke's have said, and what it has done for the show at that point, because it started getting more serious after this. Like, yeah, right. your Feats of Clay, and you had others that were testing the waters, but this was like, it left you at the end on another one of those notes, like, nothing's okay. You know, yeah, again, Batman beats the villain, but he doesn't save people. And that's what you kind of want Batman also to do. You want him to save somebody, not to beat them.
It's like the Joker said in Under the Red Hood. It's like, you know, he wins, he finds a way to win, and everybody still loses because of Batman's justice, the way Batman's justice is, because he is. And that's why this episode to me is also number one, because it essentially did what Batman Returns did for the Penguin. It gave him such a tragic backstory that you're like, oh man, like, get out, you know. But unlike the Penguin, though, Mr. Freeze literally has that story where it's like, dude, get out of my way. I'm just trying to do my own set of justice, just like you.
Yeah, just like him. Yeah,
it's Batman's literally mirror image fighting himself. It's you know. It's such a great episode. It really is. And the animation of it is great. And what's sad, too, is they would extend his suffering later on into Batman Beyond, because there's when he's just, Mr. Freeze is just ahead, because he finds out through his own misfortune of doing this to himself, he is immortal. And basically he is, meant to live on his even his story later on of when they give him a body and everything, and he thinks he's actually alive in Batman Beyond, is so sad too. He suffers tragedy again. He is literally like Batman's brother, but Batman cannot like have this guy to be a brother, because it's like, you are against justice that
it's like, you're against me, but this is exactly why every time he goes against him, he fights him for like the first 5 minutes, but then the episode always happens with Batman helping Freeze in some way. He's never really just going like, I gotta stop Freeze. He's always like, nah, I get you and I will help you, but help him my way. Like, let me do it my way first, and then if it doesn't, then I'll let you do what you want. But then Batman, obviously does it his way. That's why it's a unique character, just like Luke said. This is the paramount writing that you want to do in all animation for DC or Marvel or anything you're doing.
Yeah.
Look at this episode, folks.
Look at the series.
This is how you write a character's backstory and have it land, because this is a timeless episode. Like, I cried watching this as an adult. I was like, damn, dude. Like,
speech in the beginning, the whole, this is how I remember you, my beauty, forever young. Yeah. So that's going to be the Real Sharks top 20 episodes of the Batman animated series. Thank you for listening. This is your host, Rob, with Steve and Luke.
Yo.
Make sure you listen, like, and subscribe, and catch us on PodNation TV and wherever podcasts are broadcast. And we'll catch you on the flip side.